Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to this interview with Raj Yogi. Our topic is the power of determination. So as usual, we'll start with a reflection. There are many aspects to determination, and it very much colors how I sit here right now. Am I sitting here with that sense of focus, that engagement, that interest, that concentration, all those different colors of determination? The idea of being very determined to move into an experience. There's no force or violence, but there is a full commitment, profound interest, an interest, a determination to go deep into my inner world and experience what is real and true. To not be distracted by the thoughts that usually pull the mind, issues of the day, those roles, responsibilities, those tasks. They might come, but that sense of determination helps me to remain undistracted. That deep love and interest to move into a space that's authentic, real, and reflect on that which really matters to me. This power of determination is essential in order to access those deeper experiences of a spiritual nature. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. And welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. So the first thing that often comes up when it comes to spirituality, I often have heard of, is this perception that there's no such thing as ambition. Like, what will you be determined about when it comes to spirituality? Which is why I do find the topic I find this very much a powerful topic. And so your thoughts, this is of course Raja Yoga. So particularly about Raja Yoga, what am I determined about? What is this? Is there ambition in spirituality?
One of the words that we use in the study is this word alokik, which means not worldly. So it's translated in various ways to try and capture the fragrance of the word. Yes, spiritual is one of them, but lovely and unique. So our ambitions definitely are there, but they're called alokik ambitions. So they're lovely and unique and spiritual. So we're used to having ambitions around worldly or physical things. We're going to take all of that energy, harness that ambitious energy, and direct it towards spiritual targets or ambitions, objectives. So it's still there. It's just harnessed and redirected.
So what does that mean, not worldly? So what kind of attainments are there to be in that kind of experience?
I would almost suggest that everything we're doing on the worldly plane is actually for spiritual objectives. If you drill down, keep drilling down. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? At the end of the day, we'll eventually land up at, so I can be happy, so I can be peaceful, so I can be content, so I'll feel valued. These are all spiritual objectives, actually. This was a deep part of the lesson we received today, this morning, that we're going after these spiritual attainments, even in our physical pursuits. If we're honest, it's for spiritual objectives. So why not just cut to the chase, be a little bit more direct, and go directly at those spiritual ends?
It's quite interesting that you mentioned that it all sort of comes, it all just goes to spiritual objectives. Perhaps maybe many don't even know what it means, what spiritual means.
Spiritual, its most basic definition is non-physical. So if we, again, look honestly at our life, it's a simple way I think of it is moving from quantity to quality. So I was doing some exercises in the gym yesterday and really exploring this idea, right? I'm doing exercises, there's quantity, there's worldly physical output. But then I asked myself, and with what quality would you like to execute these exercises? And the answer that came back was just with quality. So accurate, mindful, intentional. So then I started to apply quality, not just this amount of weights and these number of sets, but with accuracy and intention and care. And so now we're moving into spiritual. When we start to talk about qualities, we're moving into spiritual. So I seem to be doing something physical, but now there's a spiritual component, the non-physical side.
It might seem to be a silly question, but what has your experience been like when you are able to carry out something with quality versus, just sort of superficially a sense of productivity?
I think that for many of us, we might feel a little bit of a tug of war when we're trying to do this, because the quantity side will pull, because it will give us a quick fix, right? But our heart, actually, I think, is really quite interested in the quality side, if you will, that I did it honestly, that I didn't just try to do it for show, but I did it honestly, even if it takes longer or it doesn't seem like much is going on for a while, but at least I know that I'm doing it honestly. So a little bit of a tug of war, but I feel it's always a greater attainment in terms of a clean heart when we go for the quality.
Sometimes you hear that phrase, in terms of workplaces or group contexts, projects over people. And sometimes, maybe most of the time, it's about quantity. But sometimes it's what quality, but maybe not the quality you're talking about, like quality of a project versus people. Because when you mention about doing something, let's say someone is creating, I don't know, like, as you would notice for those who are woodworking, for example, and they're really focusing on the quality of the actual piece of material that they're working with, but not necessarily maybe quality internally. Is there sort of a gray line? Is there?
I think there's an education because the way that we use quality in spirituality, there is no gray line, there is no confusion. And one of the words that we use for quality, we feel is the mother of all qualities, is purity. So if there is not purity of intention, purity of attitude, purity of feelings, purity of vision, then there's no quality there. So yes, I build a beautiful piece of furniture, but I hit a few people or I knock down a few people to get the supplies, then the heart will not feel clean. It'll be sitting so heavily that yes, I create something beautiful, but at what cost? Which people did I take out, right? So
Well, it's good that you clarify because you hear quality, like good
Mhm.
quality piece of furniture, quality, what kind of quality are we talking about?
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think, when we just say pure heart, that's the mother of the quality that we're talking about.
Is it always the case that good quality heart means that there's also good quality in terms of what one creates, or you can't really put those two together?
We once had a beautiful lesson on this, that if you focus on the purity of your intentions, your attitudes, all these seemingly invisible building blocks, yes, it may seem for a while like nothing is going on or things are even falling apart. But always go back and check. No, I was very clean. The heart was very clean. And eventually, in time, we're told, guaranteed, something benevolent will blossom. Now, benevolent may not be what everyone wants or what the prevailing customs and systems suggest or feelings about success suggests, but something benevolent must blossom where there is purity. So I can rest assured, if I just focus on the building blocks, that there's purity as I move along, absolutely guaranteed something good will come of it. We just have to sort of sometimes release our desires of what that's supposed to look like. I think that's where the confusion with determination comes up. So what we suggest in spirituality, be very determined to maintain that purity versus ambitious, determined about a certain outcome. So we use the words income and outcome in spirituality.
So truly, well, if someone was really to have that chance to feel that purity, then that there would be so much attainment from that versus
Right.
these other external ideas of success.
Yeah, if we focus on the inside, have the determination to maintain integrity, absolutely. At least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day, and that's a huge success.
It's interesting. I remember you were speaking to someone who really helps to design these highly intricate, very orderly schedule in terms of these online programs that we have. And I remember at one point in time, you were sharing that what matters more, that all of that actually has to happen like in a very detailed, scheduled way, or developing, a healthy relationship with everyone else involved.
I think it depends a bit on the feelings, the soul that's developing those intricate schedules. That there's a couple of things that they may need to check within themselves, that they, again, it has to do with purity, that they're, I know it sounds odd, they'd be very detached and very loving as they're creating these schedules. That detached means if no one follows any of this, I'm okay with that. But very loving, that I'm creating this for the benefit of others. If it's of use to them, wonderful. So with that feeling, I'm not doing it to feed my own gratification, but I'm doing it out of care for others with that attitude or feeling. And also, if they don't use it, absolutely fine. We sort of say this is also how God works. That he really is trying to offer things that are beneficial, but he's also, and if souls don't make any use of it, it's okay. It's absolutely fine. I will not think any lesser of anyone. So it's very important. This is the highest stage of purity, is to be very detached and very loving.
To be detached, though, one needs to be, okay, maybe we're going around in circles, but you'd have to be really determined of getting a different kind of income.
You'd have to be very content, really. Again, that purity. So it's always coming back to what is the determination around that inner purity. That's what's always around. So then I'm sort of liberated, again, from the outcomes, from what will someone think of this, or is this good enough? I'm doing it from that place of purity. That's the most important thing.
This really is really helpful to clarify, because as I brought that up earlier, is that many think of spirituality and there's any sort of lack of purpose, lack of drive. And that really seems to really turn things around in terms of I am very interested. But what I'm interested in isn't something that you can actually see, and yet it's something that really sustains like the real core of who you are.
Yeah, so I've described before this time I was with 3 other souls for some tea, and I was the only one who was not. They were all in the acting profession, and that can require a lot of so-called determination to continue to get work and to become more known, etc. And one of the members, they were 3 very different souls. It was a fascinating conversation to observe. One of them was, I don't like the term, so I won't use it, but they had had a very prolific and wonderful acting career. And now they were, if you will, in the twilight, sort of, more bit parts, less, if you will, out front parts, so very much in the chorus. And so they seem to have a little bitterness about moving into that phase of their life. And then the other one was really a sweet, they actually, I think, wanted to be a teacher, or maybe we all felt they should be a teacher because they just had such a wonderful childlike quality. They were very light, very easy. I do think they genuinely wanted to be a teacher, but they were extremely successful as an actor. But they didn't seem that that it was the end all be all, if you will, but they were getting wonderful parts and very young. And then the third person, the one I knew the most well, really fell by a series of odd events into acting. So they never had to do any of the things actors usually have to do to get a part. The auditions, they never had to do any of that. It literally just landed in their lap. And so it looked like they really weren't determined or motivated at all to, as they say, progress their career. So the one who was a little bitter as the one who everything sort of fell in their lap, do you have any ambition whatsoever? And it was a very tense moment. And the response after a pause was, yes, I have ambition. It is spiritual ambition. So the feelings between the fellow actors, the respect, this is what they're ambitious about. There can be very tense moments in the acting world. It's quite intense. And to be able to, it's not so important. They played understudy and they never had thoughts of, I hope the lead gets sick so I can go on stage. They never had these kinds of thoughts, It was just like, I hope the lead's okay. Lord, it'd be such a loss spiritually to be wishing them to fall ill so I can go on stage. That would be such a spiritual loss. There could be such a lack of purity in their heart to wish ill for someone so they can move ahead. So, this was really their ambition, was to maintain that integrity of purity, the good feelings, the respect, support for their fellow actors. And the way they did it was through detachment. I'm not an actor. It's not about getting a part. I am a soul. You're a soul. And this is the most important thing, is to support others.
So there is a connection between ambition, purpose, drive, and one's identity. How one identifies oneself.
Yeah. And that's what spirituality at the essence is suggesting. Identify yourself as a spirit and then see where those qualities of ambition, determination, drive, how are those expressed when I identify myself as a spirit and not a role.
It helps us to appreciate, again, the cornerstone of Raja Yoga is really about soul consciousness. And if there's anyone who is a Raja Yogi, you're practicing Raja Yoga and you're tuning in, you know how easy it is to jump over that.
Yeah, we should interview you if you are a Raja. But definitely, this is the fascinating. I think this is what we have to be most determined about. And again, it's the pull of the show that takes us off course, that I want to appear spiritual rather than actually be spiritual. So needs a lot of freedom from getting distracted by the image, by the quick fix, by the approval and praise, and just, no, I want the real thing. I want the real deal. So I'll feel very comfortable coming back over and over again to the seed. Otherwise, if I can't say I'm spiritual if I'm not experiencing myself to be a spirit.
So this aspect of just, there's basically a lot of resistance, and there's the image, and then there's that ambition we can fall into, that's, which seems for many could be quite appealing and attractive, just to have a higher position, be more appreciated, be more in the limelight, I'm getting respect. And then there is this experience of being a soul, and all of those attainments are connected to that. And how does one keep their determination, their ambition very vibrant?
There's a term that we use. It's going to seem like it's on the other end of the spectrum from determination. It's called unlimited disinterest. That I don't think anyone would embark on this path of spirituality unless they're starting to develop a bit of disinterest in going for those old forms of attainment that's just not working anymore for them, that it's feeling very heavy. And of course, the example we often put forward is the first student of the Brahma Kumaris, which was Brahma Baba. There's so much unlimited disinterest. And what that means is that I'm just not interested, even though they're going to pull. So I'm using my, what we call the great contrast, my experience with the dead end. And I do this a lot. If something's pulling me, I say, okay, let's say I follow that path. You should really ask for more money at work. Okay, let's say I follow that path. I just kind of fast forward. We call this moving through 3 aspects of time. I fast forward and say, okay, and then what? And then what? And where do you land up? And so we always have to, there's a wonderful joke that was featured in one of our magazines, Purity, and I'm sure many have heard the versions of this, where this wealthy businessman finds one of these street vendors. It might have been set in India, but it could be anywhere in the world. He comes across this street vendor who seems to be sleeping, not really selling, he's very ambitious at all. And he sort of says, you know what, you should just be a little bit more ambitious about what you're doing. Kind of try and promote. He says, okay, let's say I did. And then what? Well, you could actually begin to make a profit, and you could increase your inventory here of your cart. And you might even be able to hire a second worker and keep expanding. He says, okay, and then what? And then you'd be able to, get a factory, and eventually be able to get a good home for your family. You say, and then what? And then you'd be able to relax. You say, but I'm doing that right now. So why would I go through all of that? So it's a joke that's trying to suggest a point that, with experience and this great contrast, this memory of, yeah, I remember what that felt like, that other ambition, and it became heavy and it made me feel inauthentic. I'm not sure I want to go down that path again. So to really, I think our experience can be very helpful.
But you call it unlimited disinterest, which means it would actually perpetuate and continue. Could it not possibly fizzle? Could you not, be pulled into your old habits?
Well, I think that, this idea of are we not ambitious on the spiritual path, and that we're taking that energy of drive, determination, ambition, and harnessing it and connecting it to spiritual outcomes or incomes, as we suggested. So this idea of unlimited disinterest is that I'm still going to have interest, but interest in unlimited things. So I'm developing disinterest in limited outcomes, objectives. I'm very interested in unlimited outcomes or objectives, which again are called spiritual. So it's this replacement rather than this void. And that's really important. And spirituality did develop the reputation of just empty void. that I'm going to, this ascetic life, that I'm going to let go of everything, not have interest in anything. And that's where I think it seems odd to use the word determination. And what we're suggesting is that we're changing the quality of our life. When we talk about spirituality, not really ending our life, but changing the quality. What's that purity now is going to drive the quality of my life.
So those attainments of spirituality really is what makes that disinterest unlimited in that sense.
If you sort of get a taste of what it's like to, and this is an experiment I love to do during the day. Can I maintain spiritual integrity? Do I maintain a respectful vision to everyone? And the thing we notice that interferes is desires. We want certain outcomes, and that person is in the way of my outcome. And so I become very determined to get them out of the way, or to take them out, or basically to disrespectful. So I like to go through the day and just this incredible, so tolerance is a huge part of this determination. This incredible, I have an objective to maintain that purity. Respect for others is a form of purity. And things are going to try and pull me off. The old things that I used to be determined about will come. So I have to remember, but how did that make me feel? If again, the project's people, sort of putting them against each other, if I'm going towards that outcome, but it means disrespecting that soul, how will that make me feel? Remembering that, what it feels like. So, and sometimes we say, oh, it's no problem, this is very important to me. And I think we sometimes have become a little numb in terms of how it feels to let go of our purity. We might have become numb because it just felt so bad that we just stopped feeling. But it's a really big hit on the heart, on the soul, when we let go of that purity, that self-respect and respect for others in order to fulfill some desire.
So you're sharing that, Jen, to keep that determination, tolerance is needed.
Yeah.
Could you clarify what that is, and perhaps maybe again what really fosters tolerance?
So tolerance is required whenever we are implementing a change. That's the simple way I think about it, because the old will pull. There'll be opposition from the status quo. So I need what I call this override power, which is tolerance. I know there's going to be opposition. And so it's a form, it's part of determination, but very non-violent. And it's often connected to love. So love is actually what provides that tolerance. And we could probably do an interview on love, because there's many facets to love in terms of understanding, recognition, faith. All of these qualities are there, and that feeds that tolerance that's needed whenever we're implementing a change. So I'm changing where I am connecting my determination or ambition to. I'm changing that, so I'm going to need tolerance.
So what's the difference from the tolerance you're talking about and just sheer girding?
I always feel sheer girding happens when there is a lack of understanding. It becomes very violent. In the spiritual study, we say understanding is queen. It's so essential to remain nonviolent. So if there isn't understanding, then there will be this girding is a form of violence. There will be girding or some other form of violence as we try to apply these qualities. So if I'm finding there's a heaviness or pressure, then I may need to step back and just check my understanding of the situation. There might be blind spots, and to just keep pushing more and more may not be the solution. Maybe I need to take some quiet time to see if I can get a little bit more clarity about what is going on inside of me.
It's interesting when you were sharing, I was suddenly thinking about Viktor Frankl. And I'm not sure if necessarily everyone knows who he is, but he was an individual that had gone through the concentration camps in World War II. And he was able to preserve his sense of self going through those concentration camps. But the reason why he came to mind was I was thinking about being able to sustain oneself, to be able to, we're talking about the power of determination, but I do think about doing that for a long period of time.
Yeah, I'm sure there's many examples of souls that may not have a lot of overt sustenance. So how are they feeding that determination if there seems to be setbacks, if there doesn't seem to be any results, if it seems to be going the wrong way? How do I keep that determination alive? And I think the beauty, at least of this path, is it's really asking us to create some powerful anchors. The most obvious, of course, is the one with God that this path promotes. And it's really saying it's got to be real. You know, we talk about revising our objectives, really nurturing our relationship with God, because these are things that are going to become anchors. They are independent of these fluctuations or ups and downs. So it might take a little time, but it's really good. It's like preparing your workspace to take the time to ensure that these things are really in place. We call it aim and objective, but to be really clear about this is so important to me. I can even feel what I would be like in this state that I'm trying to move towards, and to realize that God's entire function is to support and nurture the restoration of our purity.
Do you feel it can be quite subtle in terms of that no pain, no gain, that kind of tolerance, that girding when it comes to the self? I know when we're using that example, that soul who does these massively intricate schedules for these online sessions.
I think they feel pain.
But to be able
Right.
to have, to manage oneself, I think that we all have sanskars or standards that might have carried on from previous births that may not have just morphed from our original sense of self. To be able to be cognizant of those kinds of things that come up, because you want to be able to have the spiritual income to be able to manage oneself while you're going through that.
Yeah, we talked about loving and detached earlier, which is really love and power. And I think those are so critical in managing the self. And again, worthwhile to develop. I was working with some souls in a class today. It was very interesting watching them trying to do some exercises. And then, you so deeply wanted to just sort of go one-on-one with each one and get some more basic mechanics under their belt. We could not. It was a group format, but you saw, well, if they could just get this alignment, then they could do this. So sometimes there's some preparatory work that we need to do. We joke often, we need to, think before we think, and this kind of thing, that there's certain arts we need to cultivate. And it might take time. It might look like nothing's going on for a while, but it's like preparing the soil. And I think if we could just have faith or trust and take the time to put these pieces in place, rather than trying to jump ahead without having those foundations. So having a really good understanding, starting to cultivate that relationship with God so I can get some power. This is going to make a huge difference in how we manage ourselves. And I think often about the original students of the Brahma Kumaris, the 1930s, 40s, and I always feel they were just a different species, they were extremely determined, very spiritually ambitious, extremely successful in the development of their own inner stage. And I just look at them and say, what happened inside that some might look at and say, wow, they're really disciplined. They're really, intense, but yet there's such a softness and non-violence to them. And that's a very unusual balance for us to understand, this very soft power, determination as a soft power. And what happened was the very beginning of their study was so focused on simple things, cultivating very deep roots of self-respect as taught by God. So taking the time, when you're developing deep roots, nothing appears to be going on above ground. So it's, to have a determination to honor that time, to give yourself that time to develop deep roots. We just love to sprint away and more advanced lessons and things, and just to master the basics, to honor that for the self is very important. That takes courage.
So it feels like there's so much of the invisible in the foundation. So easy to take it for granted, so easy to let the resistance basically overcome that.
I think that, again, the love, one needs to have love for the invisible. Really just, I was recently received a note from a soul who, again, they have the experience, they know the contrast. So we may have talked about them in an earlier session, that they came from a very athletic, very intense athletic, one of these intense athletic sports that's just guaranteed you're going to get injured. They came from this, and yes, it wasn't, they were young when they started, but then the signs of the wear and tear definitely started to show up just as they were going into fatherhood. So they're starting to develop a lot of pain, which is blocking their capacity to play with their children. Lots of pain, very humbling pain, eventually required surgery. It was very extreme. And I just received a note that they had to get a second surgery, and because it came back again. And I was fascinated by their note, because what they were saying is, the type of work that we had done a little bit of work after their first surgery. And it was a very subtle exercise, so at the other end of the extreme from their earlier athletic career, which is quite intense and over, very subtle work. But they said it's the only thing that seems to help. So they have in their memory the contrast. Yes, there's that pull. They're very invested in this for something that they love, in this case, the quality of family life. So all the pieces are kind of there to override any other pulls. They're very invested. They have complete disinterest in that past approach. And they are developing a very healthy relationship with the subtle. Someone going by might say, they don't seem to be doing much. But if you have a good eye, you can say, actually, they're doing a lot. They're doing a lot.
That individual, or any of individual, to maintain that determination, foster it, seems like they need a good eye.
Yeah.
Such clarity.
Such clarity. And again, just if we get to a point, we're very fortunate if we get to a point where we enjoy this invisible stuff. We actually enjoy. It's not like, oh, I've got to do this so I can get to the good stuff. It's like, no, this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. Some call this, enjoying the journey and not just the destination, but to really enjoy that quiet, reflective time where we're not doing anything, or it doesn't look like anything's going on, but a lot is happening. So getting to that point.
Reminds me of my last thought. I've seen ballerinas, they are athletes. When I've seen them, when I've had to be up front, at the very front of this, in the audience, there's so much power. And it reminds me of the study where there needs to be so much capacity, but it's all, again, underground.
It's a very different form of power when we're saying power of determination. Again, the only word I can often think of is soft. That it's not violent, it's not forceful, it's not driven by these desires, but it's still a great power to override perhaps some of the greatest opposition we will encounter, which is from within.
Well, thank you, Jeannie. I really love this topic. Probably because in terms of being able to sustain oneself is so essential. So thank you for those for joining. We'll have a little reflection.
Sometimes the image or the feeling that comes to mind when we think of determination is holding tight onto something, not letting go. I am determined to hold on to that expectation, desire, outcome. And I can feel that inside, that feeling with determination that the hand of the mind is holding tight onto something. But in spirituality, it always seems to be the opposite of what we've become used to. Spirituality is all about letting go. So this determination to release, feeling the fingers of the mind, the hand of the mind, softening, opening, expanding, releasing. It's a very gentle power, but perhaps the greatest. Contrasting that determination to hold tight like a fist, and the determination to let go, allow, release. This is a great power. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining with us this evening. And in terms of new sessions, we have moved, I wouldn't say maybe new sessions, but some updates. We have moved the Soul Cafe to Sundays at 5 o'clock Calgary time, 5 p.m. And right now, a couple of Raj Yoga sessions are already in order. So the next Raj Yoga Foundation session in Hindi is actually on the Wednesdays in June. So feel free to check the center's website if you're interested in that. That is on site as well as online. But we have our usual drop-in sessions online in terms of really experiencing what it means to be a soul. So those are Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Calgary time. If you wish to be on site, we have one on Fridays, again, same time, 6:30 to 7:30 at the Northeast location. But we greatly encourage you to check the center's website for anything that might be a pull for you. So thank you for joining me. Om Shanti.